Alright, in this video we're going to talk about comparing and ordering rational numbers. Remember that rational numbers are any positive or negative whole number, counting number, or integer, including fractions and decimals. Alright, so with that in mind, we're going to take a look at our first piece of information. Okay, when ordering rational numbers, here are some points to remember. First of all, look over all the numbers. Usually, if you look over the numbers, you can figure out a whole lot about where they are in terms of greater than, less than, and on the number line. So first of all, look at your numbers carefully. Then visualize them on the number line. Usually, you can eliminate the greatest and the least just by looking at where they are in the number line. Then decide to convert them to the most usable form. This is usually decimals, okay, because decimals are usually very easy to compare. Remember that right is greater and left is lower. So when you go right on the number line, numbers increase in value. When you go left, they decrease. So these are key points when comparing rational numbers or any number, okay? Look over all the numbers. See if you can visualize them on a number line. Convert them if you need to, usually to decimals, and then remember, right is greater, left is lower. So, let's take a look at what we have here. Take a look at these rational numbers. So, obviously, we have a list of 4 numbers, and we have a number line down there to help us, and we want to order them from least to greatest. Well, obviously, anything positive is going to be greater than anything negative. So we can, first of all, we can identify our positive numbers. This is positive, and this is positive. So we know this will be greater, and this will be greater than these two negative numbers. And then if we look at it, we can say, well, geez, 1.5 is actually equal to 1.5. Well, 1.5 on the number line is right here. And so we know that 1.5 will fall on the number line at that point right there. So now we know that this is greater than this positive number because this is 1 3/10. 1 3/10 is certainly less than 1 5/10. So a positive 1 3/10 will probably land somewhere about here on our number line. So we now know the order of those two greater numbers. What we don't know is the order of these two numbers. Now, if we were to convert these to decimals, we know that this is 1.2, or negative 1 whole unit and 2 more. So that's somewhere going to be, if this is a negative 1.5, negative 1.3, negative 1.2 would be right about there somewhere. Okay, if we were to look at it on a number line there. Okay, negative back in there somewhere, maybe over there more or whatnot. So now we have a general idea of where that is on the number line. But now we want to convert this into a decimal. Well, if we do that, we would then have to divide, of course, the 2 divided by 3. And 3 won't go into 2, so we would put a 0 up there and annex a 0. And 3 will go into 2 a total of 6 times. So 6 times 3 is 18. And if we subtract, we get 2. And we quickly realize that we would have a repeating decimal. So this is actually equal to a negative 0.6 repeating. So in this case, it is definitely 0.6 somewhere right about there on the number line. So negative 2/3 would be right about there. And so now we can order these from least to greatest. And we can say our lowest number is going to be a negative 1 2/10. Negative 1 2/10 is our lower number. Because it's all the way down here, it has 1 whole unit. This doesn't have a whole unit, it's decimal. So now we know that we would then have negative 2/3 And then we would go into our positive numbers, and we would have our next as 1 3/10. So we would have a positive 1 3/10, and our greatest number would be a positive 1 1/2. And that's how we would order them from least to greatest. Remember that you can always use your calculator, and that if you look over the numbers from the beginning, usually you can identify your greater ones and your lower ones just by looking at them and thinking of them on the number line. So why don't you give ordering rational numbers a try on your own? Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can order these from least to greatest. Pause the video. Okay, here we go. And again, you could always use your calculator to come up with decimals for both of these fractions. You can see that by looking at these, you might want to say that, 9/10 is pretty close to 1 whole unit, isn't it? So this is pretty likely going to be the greatest one we have. And then we have 4/5, which is also close to a whole unit, so this might be second. And then we have 5/8, and 5 is close to a half, so this is probably our lowest number. So there's a hint just by looking at them, but we might want to be sure. So we're going to take and divide 4 by 5. Again, you could use your calculator to do that, but it's basic division. 5 can't go into 4, so we're going to annex a 0, bring our decimal point up. 5 will go into 40, a total of 8 times. 8 times 5 is 40, and we get a terminating amount. So this is actually equal to 8/10. Okay? Well, 8/10 is definitely lower than 9/10. So let's take a look at 5/8, okay, and do a little division there. Okay, 5/8, we put the 5 inside as our dividend, 8 is our divisor. Have to give ourselves a decimal point and annex a 0, bring up our decimal point. 8 into 50 will go a total of 6 times. 6 times 8 is 48, and we could keep going, but our math is correct, so we know that the tenths will give us a 6 in the tenths place. So now we can order them based on the number in the tenths place. And when we do that, we can see that 5/8, which is actually equivalent or the same as 6/10, would be our lowest value. Okay? So that's our lowest value. Our next lowest value would be the 4/5, so we would have 4/5, and these are all positive numbers, and then of course the 9/10 right there. So 5/8 is less than 4/5. 4/5 is less than 9/10, and that's how you would read it using greater than, less than symbols. Okay? Alright, let's try another one on your own and see if you can order these from greatest to least. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can order these. Alright, here we go. Let's take a look at what we have. And again, just start by looking over all of the numbers and trying to visualize them on a number line. Well, in this case, you can see that you have a positive number and you have a positive number, a negative and a negative. So you know that these are going to be at the beginning of your ordering, and these two are going to be at the end of your ordering because you're going from greatest to least. Alright? Now, in this case, we have 13 and 35 hundredths. So what we would want to do is take and turn this into a decimal. So we're going to divide 3 by 5. We have to put in a decimal point and annex a 0, bring up our decimal point. 5 will go into 30 a total of 6 times. 6 times 5 is 30, so we terminate. So 13 and 3/5 is actually the same as 13 and 6/10. So 13 and 3/5 would be 13 and 6/10. So now we can compare and say that this one right here, this 13 and 3/5 is definitely greater than this. Alright, so this is our greatest number. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're going to compare, again, these two. Now, what's nice is we can see that this is going to give us a mixed number. So if we do the division for 3/2, we put the 3 in here, and 2 out here is our divisor. 2 will go into 3 one time, multiply, subtract. Add a decimal point, annex a 0, bring down our 0. 2 will go into 10 5 times. 5 times 2 is 10, and it terminates. So this is actually equal to a negative 1.5. So now we can order these from least to greatest. Okay, we can tell that this one, okay, or from greatest to least, our greatest number out of all of these, okay, will be this one, 13 and 3/5. So we would have 13 and 3/5. That's our greatest value because 3/5 would be 6/10. Then we know that 13 and 35/100 would come next. So 13 and 35/100 is next. And then of course we would go into our negative numbers, and now this is where we have to be careful, okay? Because remember, you're comparing and you're going left for least, so you want, which one comes first is going to be the greater one. So that of course would be the negative 1 and 3/10. Negative 1 and 3/10 is next, and then the lowest one, or the least out of all four of these, would be the negative 3/2. So we would have our negative 3 seconds next. Okay, it's not a very good 3. But that's how you would have ordered them. You would add 13, positive 13 and 3/5, positive 13 and 35/100, negative 1 and 3/10, negative 3/2. Alright, hopefully this video has helped you figure out how you can order rational numbers.